started with perception part 4 today. Okay. There we go. It is only with the heart that one can see rightly. What is essential is visible to the eye. Okay, so let's talk about the difference between seeing and believing a little bit today. So belief is something we talked about in our previous unit, is part of the classical epistemological definition of knowledge, that belief is part of that. And when you see something, belief is definitely part of what you're sort of employing there. That in order to see it, you kind of have to believe it. But our expectations on what we see and our emotions can affect the way we see things, okay? So maybe the term should be believing is seeing. So here's some examples where that comes into play. So in science, in the 19th century, scientists speculated that there was an undiscovered planet, which they called Vulcan, that existed between Mercury and the Sun. Now this planet does not exist, but they speculated that it would exist. And some astronomers would have claimed at the time to actually have seen it. They actually said, I have seen Vulcan in my telescopes. Now, it has turned out that no such planet exists. But those scientists so strongly believed in Vulcan that it actually would have affected what they saw. So the belief in their conviction was so strong that they felt they actually saw something that wasn't really there. Okay. In history, on January 30th, 1972, in Northern Ireland, it was an event called Bloody Sunday. It was a violent confrontation between British troops and Catholic demonstrators, and 13 Catholics died in this horrible event, okay, in Ireland. According to the British soldiers, they were attacked by the Catholic demonstrators, and they returned fire and killed them. But according to the Catholics, it was a peaceful demonstration, and they were fired on without provocation. Now, this is two different sides that saw this event in a completely different way. Okay? Now, it's possible that both sides are correct in what they say they saw. Okay? Because again, perception from that point of view could be completely different. And a lot of it is also based on what we believe about the events itself. In art, okay, people in visual art tend to have a tendency to draw not what they see, but what they think is there. So a good example of this is eyelashes on horses. Okay, the horses actually do not have lower eyelashes, okay, or eyelids. Okay, or sorry, they do have eyelids, but they don't have lower eyelashes, like eyelashes on the bottom of their eyes. Yet a lot of artists will draw them on horses, even though they're not actually there, because they believe they should be there, okay? Even though they're not actually there, they will draw them in, even though they could be looking at a photo or an actual horse. They could be looking right at the eye. They will still draw them in because they believe they should be there. So there's no doubt that belief has a big part of our visual, sensory, and other sensory perceptions, okay? Every man takes the limit of his own field of vision for the limits of the world. Okay, so let's try and find a way to distinguish reality from appearance. Okay, this problem that we have with sense perception has a real world implication. The classic example would be in criminal courtroom trials. Eyewitness testimony is some of the most compelling stuff that happens in courtroom trials, okay? They put a lot of faith into these courtroom eyewitness testimonies, and it can be a big factor. And this could be someone who could be put in jail for the rest of their life, or some major impact on theirs or other people's lives based on sense perception, specifically vision. But even psychologists will say that a single eyewitness to an event should always be looked at with real caution, because there are tons of examples of people going to prison, of people who have been convicted of crimes based on eyewitness testimony that has later turned out to be completely false. Okay? We are very, very bad at our sense perception, and not only what we actually see, but what we might believe we see, and then how we interpret that after the fact. Okay? The eye is not a camera. It does not record things in the same way that a camera does. It doesn't totally capture the visual spectrum there. And memories are not photographs. Not to mention the fact that once we see it, how do we remember we saw it? Because we only see it for a microsecond, and then it becomes memory right after that. So this does not give us a great account of what actually occurred around us. In matter of fact, it might be said that every time we remember something, we are reconstructing that event. So it's easy to confuse the source of your memories. For example, if you think back to your early childhood, how much of what you remember is actually real? Okay? Or was it just a story that was told to you so many times that you've constructed that memory from the story? Okay? Even my grandmother, who's in her late 90s, like she's 96, will tell me stories about how I used to play near a piano bench. I don't know if that actually happened, but I've been told so many times that story over my 45 years that I have a very vivid memory of it, and I can, quote, see it in my mind. But I don't know if it's real or if it's a reconstruction from a story. And I think if I asked you guys to raise your hands on your childhood memories, you could probably think of that story that your parents or your grandparents or your siblings tell you all the time, that you actually don't really remember it, but you've constructed it from that story. So sure, we still need perception. It is a huge source of our knowledge, okay? But there's at least 3 reasons why we should look at it cautiously. 1, we might misinterpret what we see right in front of us. So what we're actually seeing could be not correct. 2, we might not see something that's going on, or hear something, or smell something, or feel something. So although we're staring here, there could be really important stuff going on just beyond our vision range. Or we just miss something that's even within our vision range. We just fail to see it. And then 3, we now misremember when we're asked to recall what we saw, what we actually saw. So those are 3 big reasons that we should be cautious about sense perception as a way of knowing. Okay? We shouldn't, however, be too skeptical. As I always try to caution in TOK, don't just say, well, we can't believe anything we see, right? We should trust our senses. Absolutely we should. And we should at least be able to use our senses to distinguish appearance from reality. Okay? One way to do this is to use another sense to confirm one of your senses. So for example, what looks like an apple could be an apple, but we won't claim we know it's an apple until we touch it. Now I can feel it. If I touch the apple and it feels like glass, then right away I'll go, oh, well, that's not an apple. My daughter used to get fooled. My mom had a bowl of fruit on her kitchen table that were plastic. They were plastic fruits, so they always looked nice. But my daughter, when she was young, would always think it was a real apple until she touched it. Then she realized it wasn't an apple. But that might still not be enough. It might still feel like an apple, and then only when you taste it will you realize, oh, yeah, it's an apple. Tastes like an apple. So we actually use multiple senses to often confirm things. It depends on the claim, right? It depends on the knowledge claim. If I asked you guys to tell me what time it is right now, you probably could, just with your visual senses, grab the clock, grab your phone, figure out the time. But if that time said something that you weren't expecting, like 9 p.m., what would you be employing there to counteract that? It's not another sense. What would be the reason why you would say, this isn't right, 9 p.m.? It's not because it doesn't feel like 9 p.m. It's not because you didn't hear something that you always hear at 9 p.m. or smell something or taste something. Why, if I said to you, it's 9 p.m., if you looked at your watch and it said 9 p.m., would you think right now that that's wrong? Why? Why would you think it's wrong? Logic, right. Logic or coherence. It doesn't fit. It doesn't make sense. It would be another sort of thing coming into play. Okay? Now, if there's a conflict between our senses, it might be that we're experiencing an illusion. Okay? So have you ever done this? And if you put a pencil into a glass of water, it looks like the pencil's bent. Right? If you stand back and look at it, it looks like the pencil's bent in the water. It's not. We know that it's, for those of you who've studied science, it's like the refraction of light and stuff, and the water creates that effect. We kind of sense that it's an illusion, even though we see a bent pencil, because we might have to confirm it with other things. The very first time you maybe saw that optical illusion of the bent pencil, maybe you had to go in and actually pull the pencil out of the water to actually feel it and actually sense it in different ways. But now we don't have to do that because we can use other ways of knowing to sort of add validity to what we're seeing. Okay? Did we choose to believe touch over sight? Why didn't we say the pencil was bent? Why didn't we believe the pencil was bent? Okay? We tend to give touch a priority as a sense. Okay? Very often if you think, like if you're in a dark room and you see something in front of you, you may not believe it until you actually put your hand out to touch it. Okay? So we often give touch a real high priority in our senses. In other words, I think I see something in front of me. If you've ever been to a 3D movie and then you reach out to try and touch it, only by the sense of touch do you go, okay, it's not there. But touch can be fooled as well, right? Touch can often be very much fooled. Anyone want to, June, you want to try an experiment right now? Well, you up for this? Hang on, I'm just going to pause the recorder for a sec. That's okay. Okay, so it is kind of true, and we talked about this earlier, that we do tend to rank our senses. Remember what I told you guys, which if you had to give one up, or which one would you never give up? Okay, and then what I was mentioning before, coherence. Coherence, which now brings in logic and does it actually fit? Remember, coherence means does it fit? Does it cohere? Okay? So if you were having alcohol and you were walking home and you happened to notice a pig flying over your neighbor's house, you saw a pig flying over your neighbor's house, the next day when you wake up, you might talk about what you saw in a different way. You may not actually believe what you saw because you may have felt that your perception was influenced by the effects of the alcohol, okay? Because it's not that you didn't necessarily see it, and it's just that, meanwhile, if you would have said, well, I saw a car drive by, you wouldn't have said, well, it was the alcohol. The alcohol made me see a car drive by. No. The reason that you don't believe that the pig was flying over your neighbor's house wasn't necessarily about the alcohol. Well, that could be a part of it. It was because pigs lack the ability and the aerodynamics to fly. So it didn't cohere, it didn't fit in. It wasn't logical for that to occur. And that's the same reason why you knew the pencil wouldn't bend inside the glass, is because it just didn't make sense. Okay? That's also why you wouldn't think it's 9 o'clock on your watch right now. Okay. Another thing we often use to confirm our senses is independent testimony. We often ask someone else, hey, did you just hear that? Or was that just me? Did you just hear that? Or was that me? Did you just see that? Which is, again, this comes back to the courtroom analogy. A single eyewitness testimony isn't as strong as multiple eyewitness testimony. As a matter of fact, the more eyewitnesses you can bring in, the stronger and stronger and stronger it becomes. The more confirmation that occurs. Okay? So although our senses are likely to be in error, we can correct our sort of errors by appealing to other senses, by our sense of logic, by having secondary testimony, and all that can happen, but it's still not quite there. All of you watched the video of the moonwalking bear and didn't necessarily see the bear. So even though we all can confirm it, even though we used all our senses, we could still be wrong. Okay? So here's the way I've kind of diagrammed it out. Okay? One of our senses detects something, right? You guys hear me right now with one of your senses. Okay? Does that make sense, that what you're hearing? Okay? Did everybody hear what I just said? And can you not only hear it, but is there other senses to confirm? You can see a teacher in front of the room, right? You can feel yourself sitting in class right now. You can use your other senses to bring that all in to then make a claim of knowledge. I know that I'm in TOK right now because of this going on. Sort of that sort of perception pyramid. Okay, if the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is infinite. So now let's go really philosophical. Let's talk about ultimate reality. All right, so in a pure philosophical sense, how does perception give us reality? Okay? So our five senses draw in information about the world, okay? But they're limited, and we talked about that a couple weeks ago. Our eyes, for example, only see a certain wavelength of light, okay? Our ears only hear only a certain amount. Our sense of smell can only smell a certain limit. But we know through science that, for example, light goes beyond our visual spectrum. And we certainly know that there are sounds happening in other rooms right now that we can't hear, right? You guys can't hear what's going on in the front office right now. That doesn't mean that it's necessarily there, or does it? This is the big philosophical question. Is there sounds in the office right now? How would you answer that? Probably, okay? Is there sounds in the gym right now? Okay. Well, let me tell you that, let's just assume that there is a class in there running. Is there sounds there? Okay. Because from a philosophical position, one might argue that there isn't. It's the classic example that we're going to get to in a minute. If a tree falls in a forest and nobody's there to hear it, did it make a sound? Yeah. Exactly, yeah. Okay, so let's say there are no people in the gym, okay? But there's bouncing basketballs. They're falling from the ceiling at a steady rate. We set up a machine that does that. And then all the people left. Is there sounds in the gym right now? Is there a sound if there's no one there to hear it? Okay, so now we're getting philosophical. Let's extend this, okay? So some animals, for example bats, have a completely different sense system. They have a sense of echolocation, right? They use sound to, quote, see things. They can see things with sound. Dogs can smell better than humans, right? Certain animals can see better than humans. So if our eyes evolve differently, if our ears evolve differently, what would the world be like right now? How different would it be if, for example, you guys could see different wavelengths of light? Would I still be wearing a blue shirt? Would my voice still sound the same way? Would the chair you're sitting on feel the same if we evolved differently? No, I don't think it would. Things would certainly look, feel, sound differently. So how would that affect our world? What would the world be like? So if we think the world is now going to be different, is it in fact different from a philosophical position? Is it a different reality? Okay. Let's dig deeper into this rabbit hole. Let's dig deeper into the philosophy here. What is really out there? Okay? What are you actually seeing? From a philosophical standpoint, if we strip away our interpretation of the sense organs and we just say, what is reality? Okay? Let's look at it with three examples. Okay? If you burn your hand in a fire, you think of the pain as being in your hand, and the pain wasn't in the fire, okay? You think that the pain is happening apart from the fire, that the pain is your subjective experience between the fire and your hand. I assume we all think that, right? That when you burn your hand, you think of the pain as in your hand, not in the fire. Okay? If you drink Coke, it tastes sweet. Is the sweetness in your mouth, or was it in the Coke? Think of that like the fire example, right? It's the same kind of example. We didn't think of the pain as coming from the fire into your hand, but we tend to think of it as the sweetness coming from the Coke into your mouth. But really, is the sweetness in your mouth? It's a subjective experience that results from the Coke and your taste buds, just like the subjective experience of the fire in your hand, okay? So it might be easy to accept that taste and pain are subjective experiences, okay? But it's harder to grasp things like color when it comes to that, right? Is the sky blue, or are we just sensing it as blue, right? Like, is the fire pain, or did we just sense pain from the fire? Is the Coke sweet, or did we just sense sweet from the Coke? Is the sky blue, or did we just sense blue? So what do you think? Is the sky blue? Or did we just sense it? So it's not blue. We sense it to be blue. So what color is the sky then? See what I mean? This is where the philosophy gets into play. What is really out there? Is my shirt blue? Or do you just sense it to be blue? Right? Yeah.
Is my blue same as other people's blue? Like,
Exactly.
we just call it blue, but we could be seeing, like, you could be seeing red in my eye, but you have to call it blue this entire time.
We've all agreed that it's blue, right?
Like on the word, but not at the actual.
And the bigger philosophical question is, what color actually is it? Because if you see it as a different blue than I see it as a different blue, what color is it at all? Right? So here's where the philosophy end comes in, right? Is Snow White, not Snow White, the one that lives with all the weird little people, but no, is the snow outside, oh, it's actually kind of dark and black and brown now, but is pure snow white, or are we just sensing it to be white? Now, if we say the snow is white, then we could also make the same argument that the fire is pain, and that the Coke is sweet. And it starts, so the Coke is sweet, I think a lot of people will accept. But the fire is pain, that there's pain in the fire, that's a little bit harder to kind of justify, right? Because it seems like it's actually the pain is in your hand, not in the fire. So white is the interaction that our eye mechanics have when it sees that particular wavelength of light reflected by the snow. So, if our eyes had evolved differently, and we were sensitive to light at a different wavelength, we wouldn't have seen white in the snow at all. So if like when I came back to that evolution thing, what about other animals? They certainly probably don't see, if they see in a different light wavelength, they certainly don't see the white snow the way we see the white snow. They don't taste the Coke the same way we taste the Coke. It's even said this occurs within humans. It's said that at younger ages, your taste buds are more sensitive, right? That's why a lot of little kids don't like foods. And then when you try them later in life, you might like them or dislike them. I bet you guys are at an age now that you can name foods that you didn't like when you were a kid and now like, or vice versa. And you know what? It's going to happen again to you guys. It's something I say to my daughter all the time. Keep trying new things because you never know. Your taste buds might completely change. So we must conclude that there is no color in the world. There's no color in the world. Reality is colorless because it's only our sense perception of it. If you guys accept that position, that the color is in the way we sense it and not actually out there, then the world is colorless. Right now you're living in a colorless world. Okay, grasp that psychologically for a second. Now let's go back to the tree and the forest example. Okay. It's a common answer to say yes, just like the basketball's bouncing in the gym. If the tree falls in the forest, yes, it makes a sound. Okay? And we can resolve this two ways. We can say, well, sound is the vibration of air molecules. That's what sound is, right? And it hits your ear, and we talked about those mechanics. So the fact that that tree falls or that those basketballs are bouncing, they're going to vibrate those molecules. That's going to happen. But the second part of it is the actual experience of the sound. In order for the sound to be called sound, we have to experience it. We have to receive the sound through our physical ears. So if there's no one there to hear it, there's a physical sound, but there's no experienced sound. The air molecules vibrated, but nobody experienced the sound. So this kind of solves the problem, but it makes you think a little bit about this, okay? In your house right now, there may be nobody home. And even if you pulled out your cell phone right now and called home, your phone in your house would be ringing to vibrate the air molecules, but nobody's experiencing that sound right now. So how many of you have an empty house right now? There's nobody home. I do. I know. Well, I have a dog there. But so imagine that the phone's ringing in your house right now, and there's nobody there. Is that an actual sound? Is there a phone ringing? Okay. Now let's go extreme again. if millions of years ago, before any actual biological creatures that evolved ears existed, was the Earth a completely silent place? Again, if you accept this position that sound is our experience of it, that in order for it to be called sound, we have to experience it, it's not just vibrating molecules, then think about that. Millions of years ago, this planet was a completely silent place and completely colorless. Okay? So is that the reality we experience? A colorless, soundless reality. Only by being here do we actually then apply the color and apply the sound through our experience of it. So if we're not here, now this might be a neat, I just thought of this. This is me riffing now off the cuff. So when you die and your experience of it dies, the world continues to then be a colorless, silent place. Only by being here does it actually add color and sound to it. Whoa, that's kind of poetic. I don't know. I kind of got that. Okay, what about this? What if we were able to surgically remove every ear of every creature that has ears in the world? What if we were able to do that? Would the world be a completely silent place? I would say, if I asked that to someone who isn't in this class, if I just pulled some kid into the room and I said, if we pulled every ear off of every creature that could hear, would the world be completely silent? What do you think the answer would probably be? He'd probably say yes. It would be silent. Now, he would have to take a second and then think about that and go, well, wait a minute, the sounds would still be there, but we can't hear them. Nobody can hear them. So, yeah, it would be silent. Again, you're really in this realm of philosophy here. Okay. If a rose grows and then dies in a garden where no one was there to see it, did it have a color? Same argument, right? We differentiate between the physical and the experienced, okay? So there's the physical color and then there's the experienced color. And if we are drawing a line there between them, it's an important line to draw, okay? Okay, table. This is a table, obviously, right? Okay. When we leave this room at the end of the day, how do we know that the table still stays there? How do we know that the table is still there if we're not there to experience the table? Right now in your house, if it's empty, your bedroom is there and there's a bed in your bedroom, how do you know it's still there? Well, these are very philosophical questions, right? But if you snuck into this classroom at 2 in the morning and looked, chances are the table's still going to be there. If you went over and touched it, chances are it's still going to be there. Alex? I'm going there. Yeah, we're getting there, okay? Absolutely. For those of you who don't know what he's talking about, Schrodinger's cat. Anyone heard of this before? Alex, could you tell what Schrodinger's cat, the experiment was?
So the experiment was, it's got puts a cat in a decaying silver box.
Which, by the way, is lethal, right? Decaying uranium is a lethal isotope, yeah. So you can't look in the box, right? That's the whole idea of the experiment, is you can't look in the box. So the cat can be either alive or dead, and you can't hear it, you can't see it. Like the box is soundproof, right? Now it's possible that the uranium won't kill the cat, and you have a fully alive cat in the box, and it's possible that the uranium will kill the cat. So the question is, in Schrodinger's cat experiment, is the cat is in a state of both being alive and dead at the same time? Because we don't know. Okay, we don't know at this point. And it's, again, very similar to this sort of philosophical position here. Okay? Oops. With this table, okay, unless you look at it, you don't know if it's there. It's maybe when you were a kid, you had that same problem with the fridge door light. I always used to go on the ground and try and, when I was a little kid, trying to see if the light would go off if I got close enough to the fridge. Then I figured out it was this little switch at the bottom, and it kind of broke my mind. But a lot of you might be going at this point, this is so philosophical, I don't like this. Okay, it's nonsense. Of course the table's going to be there in the middle of the night. Of course it is. This is silly to actually have this discussion. But it's an exercise in knowledge. How do you know the table's still going to be there? Okay? Sure, we could set up a video camera to make sure that the table isn't leaving in the middle of the night, right? Okay? How do we know then that the actual movie we took is accurate? Right? How do we know that the movie we shot hasn't been tampered with, right? So, from a philosophical point of view, you might still be at the point of saying, who cares whether or not the tables are there? Okay? We can't necessarily prove that this table will be here at 2 in the morning, but we may not be able to prove that tables always act like tables in a table way, okay? But it doesn't matter, okay? It doesn't matter whether the table is there or not there. It doesn't matter if the tree in the forest makes a sound or not. It doesn't actually help me with our lives, right? And I get that. That's a different position. I love this quote, okay, from Galileo. The tickle is not the feather, okay? It speaks highly to what we're talking about there. Is the tickle in the feather, or is the tickle in you? Okay, so I'll wrap today with the way philosophers have kind of broken apart these theories of reality. So there are 3 theories about this. Theory 1 is called common sense realism. This is basically what you sense is what's there. So when you look up in the sky and you see a blue sky, it's because it's a blue sky. When you hear a dog barking, it's because it's a dog barking. Stop questioning things. Reality mirrors the way we perceive it. That's a chair because I can see it's a chair or a stool, right? Stop questioning this from a philosophical position. It's common sense. What you see is what you get, okay? That's the most common position that most of us take philosophically. The second one is scientific realism. Now this one digs a little bit deeper. From a science perspective, and I know a lot of you guys have studied a lot of high-end science, when you see this table here, what do you know it actually is? What is a table? Go scientific for a second. Like what is that table made of? Solid matter. Go deeper. What's matter? Atoms, okay? So what's an atom? How many of you studied an atom? It's a nucleus, right? Surrounded by electrons. Anyone, by the way, this is so poetic. Anyone see Cosmos last night? They totally did a show all about this. So I should have recorded it. The electrons circle the atom, right? So you have a little atom, and then around it are electrons. And yeah, go deeper than that. But let's just stop at the atom for a second. We know that this table is made up of billions of those atoms, right? But what you don't know, maybe, is that the electron, if this room was an atom, if this school was an atom, okay, and I'm not quite sure on the math on this, but I think I'm pretty accurate. If this entire school was an atom, the outside of the school would be where the electrons are flying. The size of the nucleus would be about the size of a basketball in the middle of the room. That's how much distance there is between the nucleus and the electrons that circle it in just one atom. What's in between is a whole lot of nothing. So this table is mostly nothing. There's mostly nothing. Okay? Now that's a weird thing to grasp, is that table is mostly nothing, and so are you, by the way. You're mostly nothing, because atoms are mostly nothing, and the universe is mostly nothing. It's a universe of nothing. But to grasp that level of reality, when you think the reality we live in is that, you need to have a strong grasp and acceptance of the scientific position. So that's certainly a different position than common sense realism. Okay. So the table is mostly nothing, okay? The nothing is the result of the way that the electrons move, and the science that we've learned from all this science tends to sort of create that. The third position is this position known as phenomenalism, okay? It's a position that came from empiricism, which basically is more extreme, and this is the way it goes. It says that matter is the permanent possibility of sensation, and it makes no sense that the world exists independent of our experience of it. So its philosophical position is the world only exists because we're there to experience it. If we're not there to experience it, there is no world, there is no universe. Now again, this is an extreme position, But you can see how you can take a little bit from that position. When we talked about the fire and the pain, that you're kind of pulling that sort of philosophical position from it. I told you to buckle up. We're going to get very philosophical today. Okay? So a phenomenalist would say that you only have a table here if you can experience the table. Right? There's only Africa if you experience Africa. Okay? Phenomenalism follows that logic that all knowledge must ultimately be experienced to be claimed. So if you claim you know something, you can only know it if you experience it. Okay? That the world is independent, or it cannot be independent of our experience. Okay? Again, a bit of an extreme position, absolutely, but I wanted to present it to you guys as 3 possibilities of what is actually out there. Okay? Okay. If I lean on this table, I shall not go through or be scientifically accurate. The chances of my scientific elbow going through the table is so excessively small that it cannot be negated in practical life. Okay? Since that table is made all of atoms and your elbow is made of atoms, it's possible that your elbow could go through the table. But it's all based on science. It's all based on phenomenalism, that I can't necessarily experience the table. And it can also be just based on common sense realism. My elbow's not going to go through the table walks because it's a table and it doesn't go through. Stop being so philosophical. So what should you believe? Wow, that is a strong thing for a teacher to put up in front of you in a class, but I'm going there. Let's do this, okay? What should you believe? Well, there's 3 positions you could take. Feel free to take either one of them or all 3, okay? What you see is what you get. It's all about atoms and protons and nothing and quarks and dark matter. Boy, you could dig even deeper. Or it's all about phenomenalism. The tree, there's no sound unless you're there to experience the sound of the tree, okay? All of these, in some way, are insufficient positions. They all kind of can be both counterintuitive and insufficient in the way they define reality. That's why no one solved this. That's why philosophy exists, is to try and grasp these concepts. Yes? Yeah.
Does that mean that there's no one around to experience you?
Correct. But you experience you. So you yourself experience yourself, right? So yeah, it is absolutely, yeah, it is a definitely out there position. But there's certain things you can learn from it. Absolutely you can. If we choose empiricism and we choose phenomenalism, we insist we know nothing about ultimate reality. And if we reject that position, say, nope, that's ridiculous, okay? That there's a world independent, no matter what, there's a world out there, whether I'm here or not. When I die, there's still going to be a universe, right? Most people tend to fall into the first category in common sense. But most people will also start pushing themselves into the other 2 positions. Science class in school will tend to push you into the second position a little bit. Once you start learning about atoms and stuff like that, or chemicals and stuff like that, you tend to see things differently. You tend to experience things differently. The third one usually comes from life experience, right? As you get older, you start to think a little more philosophically about these things. Generally because you're not put into classes like this. You guys have the advantage of taking a class that does tend to look at a more philosophical, questioning view of reality. Okay, wrapping up perception. Absolutely, it is a way of knowing, an important way, okay? There's more to it than just our sense perception can be granted, okay? You can deceive perception, you can use perception, you can be selective in your perception, you can distort your perception, but it doesn't give us absolute certainty. When you claim to know something, yes, perception is a part of that, but it's still not going to take you to the level of absolute certainty, okay? Whew. That was well timed. All right. Just turn off my recorder.